Today, we're going to be talking about the historical thinking skills that we use in our Habits of Mind lessons. These four skills are sourcing, contextualization, close reading, and corroboration. The first skill we're going to talk about is sourcing. Before reading the document, historians ask questions about the document's creation. These are some questions that we might see in sourcing questions. Who wrote this? Why was it written? When was it written? And who is the intended audience? We are going to use this primary source as our example as we look at the four historical thinking skills. We always want to source the document before we get to reading it. Remember, when we're sourcing the document, we're thinking about who the author is, when this was written, and maybe what the author's purpose was for writing this. We can first look at the title of the document, Red Cloud Speech to the Secretary of the Interior. We can tell here that this type of document is a speech. We also see that this speech was to the Secretary of the Interior, so we know that Red Cloud's audience is the American government. Next, we see 1870, so we can note that this speech was given in the year 1870. We can also go to the bottom of the document to find more sourcing information. We can see that this document is from a report by the Board of Indian Commissioners. Once again, we see that this was given in 1870. And if we look a little bit farther, we can see that this report was printed in 1871. Next, we're going to be talking about the skill of contextualization. This means that we want to talk about what else was going on at this time to help us better understand the historical event we are learning about. So historians can connect the time and place in which the document was created with events in history. Here's some things that might help historians as they're trying to contextualize a document. We could use a timeline or map, apply background knowledge that we might have learned before. This could be a secondary source like a textbook. We can investigate how perspectives change over time, and just like good historians do all the time, we can write some notes in the margin as we are reading our document. Let's go back to Red Cloud's speech. Once again, this was written in 1870. So we want to think about what else was going on around the year 1870. This is when a timeline could really help us out. Let's think about some of the events that happened just before 1870. In the year 1862, the Homestead Act was passed. In 1867, Nebraska became a state. And in 1868, Red Cloud agreed to move to a reservation. So we can see how all of those events that happened before could have had an impact on his speech. We also want to note that in 1874, after this speech was given, gold was found in the Black Hills. We can contextualize even more, not just with the year at the top of the page, but if we go down farther into the document, we can read this line. I want the Great Father to make no roads through them. I have told these things 3 times. So if we think about what Red Cloud said there, we can see that he wants no roads through the Black Hills. Now, he never said Black Hills here, but we can infer that he means that when he says, I want the Great Father to make no roads through them. And remember, we talked about above that gold was found in the Black Hills in 1874. Close reading is another important skill that historians use when reading a book or document. Historians will close read a book or document to help learn about a subject, noticing all the interesting and important details. They will often read with a pencil so they can take notes to help them remember. So historians read documents multiple times to discover clues about the author's claims, and once again, always reading with that pencil in hand, noting those important details. Here's what historians do when they close read a document. They look for unfamiliar words, note tone, voice, and connotation, highlight key evidence, and record inferences, questions, and conclusions. Let's do a close read of Red Cloud's speech to the Secretary of the Interior. Let's look at our first highlighted line. I was raised on this land where the sun rises. Now I come from where the sun sets. So here we see Red Cloud compares the sun rising with the sun setting to show how the lives of Native peoples have been negatively impacted. If we go down a little bit farther, we see the following line. The men the Great Father sends have no sense, no heart. We see that there is a negative tone to this line, which helps us to better understand the author's purpose to this excerpt. And if we go down a little bit farther, we see this line. The white children have surrounded me and have left me nothing but an island. When we first had this land, we were strong. Now we are melting like snow on the hillside. We see a simile here. We are melting like snow on the hillside. This is once again emphasizing the decimation of his people. Our final skill is corroboration. This is when historians cross-check multiple sources to compare, contrast, and draw a conclusion. When we're looking at some corroboration questions, we might ask, what do other sources say? Do the sources agree? What are other possible sources? And which sources are believable? Now we're going to practice corroboration with Red Cloud's speech to the Secretary of the Interior. For the purpose of this video, let's assume that we have also read the primary documents, Cawthorne's account, and the Fort Laramie Treaty. When we go down to our first highlighted line, it says, I am good to his white people. We can corroborate that with Cawthorne's account, which was a homesteader's journal written in 1865. Cawthorne claims that Indians attacked white settlers. We can clearly see a difference here between these two perspectives. The homesteader's perspective is that the Indians were attacking the settlers, while Red Cloud's perspective is that he was good to the white people. If we go down a little bit farther, we also see the line, when the white man comes, he leaves a trail of blood behind him. Once again, we're noting the difference between these two accounts. If we continue reading, it says, I have two mountains in that country, the Black Hills and Bighorn Mountain. I want the Great Father to make no roads through them. I have told these things 3 times. Well, we can corroborate this with the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868, which included the Black Hills and the Great Sioux Reservation. So there you have it, our 4 historical thinking skills in our Habits of Mind lesson plans. Our skills of sourcing, contextualization, close reading, and corroboration work closely together to help us read and think like historians.